All right. So here we are. Welcome. If you're watching live, this is a nice Sunday broadcast. If you're not, well, welcome to the broadcast anyway. Welcome to SYQH Radio. We have a live broadcast today. You might be watching the recording, but in case you weren't familiar or you didn't know, I'm David Garcia. And if you own a two, three, or four family property in New York and you're thinking about selling, whether it's now or in the future, this episode is definitely for you. And if you happen to know somebody that could be in that position, please share this episode with them. Because selling a multifamily home, a multifamily property here in New York, is very different from selling a single family home. You may have tenants, you might have rental income, you may have leases, you may have expenses that wouldn't be present in a single family residence, right? You might have one buyer looking at the property as a home where they're going to invest in the property and live in it, right? And then rent out the other unit or units. And then you have another buyer that's going to look at it strictly as an investment. They're just looking at the X's and O's, the numbers, the figures, that's all. And if you don't understand these differences before you list, you could be leaving money on the table. You could attract the wrong buyer, or you can make decisions that cost you time, stress, and opportunity at the end of the day. So, the whole plan for today is I'm going to walk you through 10 things that every multifamily homeowner should know before putting their property on the market, right? And whether your property is in Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Long Island, Manhattan, or anywhere else in New York, these are the things that you want to think about before you actually sell, right? So, so let's get into it, right? Number one, multifamily properties they're valued differently, period, right? One of the biggest mistakes that multifamily homeowners are making is that they assume that their property is valued exactly like a single family home. And it might be because when you were looking for the property, you were looking at it from the perspective of you're buying a home to live in. You might have multi-generational living situation where you have different generations of your family occupying the entire property. I grew up in a situation like that. So you're not looking at it from the same perspective that an investor would look at it, where they're strictly looking at what the return on their investment is going to be, right? So it's not always going to be looked at from the perspective of a single family home, right? And with a single family with a single family home, buyers are usually they're looking at things like the location of the home, the condition, the layout, the bedroom count, lot size, and then they're looking at recent comparable sales, right? And then you know that when you bought this home, right, there was that sense of emotion. So they're looking for that emotional appeal, that je ne sais quoi, right? That feeling of like this is home, right? And it's something that I always talk to my clients about who are searching for a property, whether they already bought one and they're buying another one, or they're buying for the first time. Um, you just know what's yours is yours, right? So when people are looking for a single family home, that's all included, right? Those things all still matter in a multifamily property, but multifamily properties can also be looked at, through the lens of income. And sometimes it could be the main driving factor, right? So there are different ways for your property to be valued at the end of the day. First, there's the market value. So that's based on what similar multifamily properties have recently sold for in the area. Second, there's income value, right? That's especially important to investors, right? And sometimes even people that are going to be living in the units, they want to know you know, how much their mortgage is going to be, right? But also, how much can the other apartments be rented for, right? Because they want to know, how much of the mortgage are they going to be paying, and how much of the mortgage are these units going to help with the payments, right? So, but the income is especially important when it comes to investors, and they want to know how much rent the property is producing, right? What the expenses are, and what kind of return they can expect. So these are all things that you should kind of keep in mind and start putting together a report, or even like, just a folder of the different expenses that you have, what the income is, also, evidence of the actual expenses, and of any improvements you've done to the property, or also, proof of monthly payments, right, of the monthly rent, because that's going to be something that they want to know. They want to have some kind of log and understand what kind of tenants they can expect, right? And at the end of the day, they want to know what kind of return they're going to be able to expect on this property, knowing all of the numbers, right? And then third, there's a replacement value, right? What would it cost to rebuild or replace that property today, right? So again, that's something that investors are going to be looking at, right? It's going to be more so that than an end user, or like somebody like you and me that would actually be living in the property, right? And then fourth, there's the appraised value, right? So this is what, at the end of the day, this is a make or break when it comes to a lot of transactions. This is what the lender is willing to support through financing, right? And here's why this matters, right? Different buyers, they may look at the same property very differently, right? Um, a Let's call it an owner occupant. They may see a home where they can live in one unit and rent out the others, right? An investor, they're going to see the numbers, they're going to see the cash flow, expenses, and the potential upside. A lot of times, that's what they're purchasing, is the potential upside that they can get in this property, right? And a lender, they're going to look at the property through the scope of their guidelines of comparable sales, the condition of the home, and then the risk of lending on this particular type of home, right? So before you list your home for sale, you need to understand how your property is likely to be viewed by the market as a whole, from the two different segments that we're talking about. Well, the three different segments, if you include the bank, right? Because if you don't understand how buyers are evaluating the property, it's going to be much harder to price it, to market it, and to negotiate properly, right? Because if you don't understand where they're coming from and what to expect with those different market points, um, you could be really disappointed. You could also be expecting something that's not realistic. Um, or, like we said, you could be leaving money on the table. So you really have to understand the different segments of the market. You need to understand the end user, the one that's going to live in the multifamily home. You have to understand the investor, and you have to understand how the bank is going to look at it, right? Um, you're also going to be, you have to know who your buyer is, right? Not every multifamily buyer is looking for the same thing. The investors, they're going to care about the numbers, the income, cash flow, expenses, return on investment, and they're gonna care about something that a lot of people don't talk about, right? And that's market rents, right? So they care about whether the rents are at market value or below market value. And a lot of times we have homeowners that have had tenants that they can, that they're very comfortable with, right? They're happy that the tenants pay on time, that they've been taking care of the property, that they take care of the home like their own. They might even get a discount for helping with, maintenance of the property, snow removal, throwing out the garbage, cleaning up, fixing the laundry area. Um, but they're not paying market rent. They're paying below market rent. And what does that mean? Well, let's say you got a tenant 15 years ago that was awesome, right? And you've kept them for 15 years, but you didn't raise their rent at all, or you raised it, at very small increments throughout all the years. And now, 15 years later, the rents, as we all know in New York, rents have increased tremendously. So when these home buyers that are investors are looking at that, they're seeing, are they paying, the rent that the market would pay today? So is that two bedroom, are they paying let's just make a number. This is not an exact number, but let's say they're paying $3,800 for that two bedroom versus $1,500 for that two bedroom from 15 years ago, right? So that's something that they take into consideration. And they care about, what work needs to be done on the property and whether the numbers make sense after the closing. And that includes what they would have to do to bring not only the home up to date, the property up to date, in case they do have to make some types of renovations, how easy that's going to be. Because if you have people living in the units, they're not allowing for you to go in and renovate. You have to wait until they move out, or you have to inconvenience them. And then you're also looking at the fact of, how long are these tenants going to be here, and when am I actually going to get that return on my investment, right? So they care about all that, and that's what I mean by making sense, the numbers making sense after the closing, right? Now, other buyers, they're going to be the owner occupants, right? So they want to live in one unit, rent out the others, right? This is very, very common in New York, very common in Queens, Brooklyn, Long Island. For them, the property is not just an investment, right? This is also their home. And in many cases, that's how you look at it, right? You have a lot of different scenarios when it comes to New York real estate, right? So this type of buyer, the owner occupant, the one that's going to live in the home, they care more about the layout, the condition, parking, outdoor space. They care about what's going on in the nearby community. What schools are nearby, what transportation is there. They want to know what it's like to live in the area, along with what the home, what amenities the home comes with, and how comfortable they're going to be living in that home, while also having the other units pay, for their mortgage, right? They're trying to build equity, and sometimes, well, a lot of times, buyers in today's environment, they're going to qualify more easily for a multifamily home than for a single family home, which I had no idea at the beginning of my career, right? And again, you got to speak to your lender to find out if that's you. But they want to know, right? And one of the things that we run into when we're speaking with buyers is that of the buyers that are looking for a multifamily home, is they want to know that at least one of the units is going to be delivered vacant, right? They're happy that the other tenants are paying the mortgage on the rent on time, and they're not as concerned about how much they're paying, even though there is a concern there. But as long, a lot of buyers that are trying to move into a multifamily home, they either want, all the units vacant, or they just want at least one so they can move in, they can start building their equity, and have the rest of the tenants help them with the monthly payments by paying the rent on time, right? But that's what they're looking for more versus what an investor would look like, right? And then you have what people call house hacking, which is buyers who they just want to reduce their housing expenses by having tenants help pay the mortgage. And this could be with the way I just described, or they look at it from different perspectives, right? And then you have the multi-generational families, which we've touched upon, at the beginning of it. But they might want their parents, the adult children, siblings, extended family, all living under one roof. Um, and still have, separate space and their own privacy, right? So this fits into a lot of people's planning, especially with cost of living, with everything going on, uncertainty, and so on. There are a lot of families that are looking to live in this type of environment, right? So when you're selling a multifamily and you're sitting with an agent, you really have to ask, who is the most likely buyer for my home, right? Is this going to be more attractive to an investor, or is it going to be more attractive to an owner occupant, right? And at the end of the day, is it going to be, better for the house hacking? Is it a great setup for the multi-generational family that wants to live here? Because knowing who the buyer is, it at the end of the day, it's going to help determine it's going to help determine your pricing strategy, your marketing strategy, your showing strategy, and even how you prepare the property at the end of the day, right? So it's really important to understand that, and the way you understand that is to meet with your preferred agent. Hopefully, if you're looking in New York, if you're thinking about this in New York, you reach out to this guy, but you reach out to them, and then you ask them what their perspective is, what they believe is going to be the buyer that is looking for their home, and how the type of buyer is going to impact how the marketing should be done, how the pricing should be done, and how the showing is going to be done. Because selling a multifamily home in New York is a little more involved than a single family home. There are things to consider, like the other tenants that are present in a home when you're showing a property. If you think about it, the buyer does want to see the condition of all the units, and we all have lives, different schedules, different temperaments, and so we really have to be very conscious of people's privacy, people's needs, people's rights, and show the units when they can be shown, and try to have a very um, friendly relationship with everyone involved, right? So we have a whole guide on how to structure that properly, because it's very important to get off on the right foot with everybody, right? So sitting with your favorite agent, going over all those things. You want to make sure that you do that and that you take the advice, to heart, because you don't want to market the property to the wrong buyer pool, right? You might miss the people who actually value it, value it the most at the end of the day, right? So, those are all important things to keep in mind, right? The third thing that you need to know, right, when it comes to selling a multifamily home is you need to know whether you can sell the property with tenants or without them, right? This is one of the most common questions that we get when we're meeting multifamily homeowners when they're looking to sell their home. They're always asking, because they want to make sure that everyone's taken care of, and they want to make sure that they not only make the most amount of money possible in the marketplace, but a lot of them want us to be very, very conscious of the tenants that have been, you know, with them forever, that have been very timely, very responsible, that maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they have issues with tenants. They want to know if they can sell the property with tenants, right? It's a question. It's a very common question in both scenarios, whether they're the tenants are being are are dream tenants for them, or there's issues with the tenants. They want to know if they can sell and what that means, and it does mean something different, right? The short answer is you can definitely sell with tenants. Absolutely. That's something that can be done, that we have done. You can sell a multifamily home with tenants here in New York, but having tenants changes the strategy on how to sell the property, right? Because it doesn't stop the sale. It would change the strategy based on whether they were cooperative or not. And you really have to look at a few things, right? Do the tenants have leases? Are they month to month? Are they paying market rent? Again, I harp on that because that is a very large question that is looming, and sometimes it's just thrown in the background and not looked at until very late in the game. You want to make sure that we understand that from the beginning, right? If they're paying below market rent, that needs to be considered in the whole scheme of things, right? Again, are they cooperative? Do they allow showings? How can we structure the showings to make it as the least inconvenience possible to them? Um, wh- do they have their units presentable? Will they be able to keep their units presentable? Will they be staying after the closing? Do they need a little extra time? Um, will the buyer be looking for immediate occupancy? So do they need the entire property vacant? Is the buyer an investor who wants tenants that are already in place? Because that could be the best case scenario for everyone involved. Um, or is the buyer an owner occupant that we've talked about a couple times now, who needs at least one of the units vacant, right? These questions all matter, right? They all, again, change the strategy, and these are all things that we address from the beginning. We want to make sure that we're setting expectations from the minute we sit down talking about, what it would take to sell your multifamily home, right? Um, it matters not only because it changes the strategy and that sort of thing that we were just talking about, but it's because tenants affect access to the property, right? Tenants, they affect presentation. Tenants affect the perception the buyers are going to have about the property and about the situation that they're getting themselves involved in, right? Is this going to be complicated for them? Is this something that they can deal with? Is this something that they want to deal with? So tenants can affect value in that sense, right? They can affect the timeline. That has happened in the past where we talk about how negotiation and selling, not only does it come down to dollars and cents, but we're also looking at terms and conditions. And the timelines of both the buyer, the seller, and the tenants all come down into the terms and conditions of a contract. So these are all things that we need to know and be able to clearly relay that information to the seller's attorney, and honestly to all attorneys involved, so that everyone's on the same page, and so these things don't slip through the cracks and create problems down the road, right? This is through years of experience of dealing with multifamily homes in New York, not only in personal sales, but being in an office and with Keller Williams, our network. dealing with so many agents that have had, different types of transactions, and we all talk about, how to improve, how, which causes us to talk about scenarios that were tough and how we got out of those situations. So there's always that exchange of information and experience, and that's why I give you this information so that you can use it to your advantage and make sure that you're prepared when you indeed feel that you're ready, or at least start thinking about selling your multifamily home, whether it's the family's home, whether it's mom and dad's home or grandpa and grandma's home that they had as a multi-generational home at one point, and now it's time to, maybe move on from the home. They can't take care of it, or maybe they passed, or they're moving into a smaller, more manageable property where they would be downsizing, you're downsizing. These are all things that we need to consider in order to make everything as smooth and seamless as possible, and see problems ahead of when they come to light. Because there's always going to be issues when it comes to real estate, but the more proactive and the more initiative we take at the beginning, the not only is it easier, but we are able to kind of make the waters a little more smooth and really navigate things more in a more strategic fashion when you have all the information there, right? Um, so a property with cooperative tenants, with organized leases, with clean documentation, and with strong rental income is going to be very appealing to the right buyer, right? But a property with difficult access, which many times that has been dealt with, unclear lease terms, documents have been lost, there's nothing tangible there, below market rents, and then the uncertainty around occupancy, that is what creates hesitation with some buyers, and where there is opportunity to still get through that, right? Because everyone has such a negative connotation when it comes to dealing with that last batch of scenarios there, but there is a solution to each problem. It's just knowing the problems, or knowing the landscape ahead of time, is how we can come to the solution, with whichever solution that needs to be, right? The key at the end of the day is this: having tenants, it does not it does not prevent you from selling, right? I want to underscore that. But you need to really understand how the tenants are going to impact the buyer pool, the timeline, and the strategy, right? And we haven't even talked about what the different types of strategies are, but that is more of a one-on-one kind of situation, right? So if you'd like more information, if you want to find out how to implement this in your particular situation, reach out. You can always text or call at 917-982-8899, or email me at dgarcia@kw.com, or just respond to this video, so we can kind of walk you through your own scenario, and no cost or obligation, but at least you'll kind of know a game plan ahead of time, right? Number four. So should you sell the property vacant or occupied? This one is a question that we get from the owners themselves, and again from situations where it's the family's house, right? So it's grandpa and grandma's house, mom and dad's house, and should we sell it with the tenants or vacant, right? It's one of the most important questions that comes up when it comes to selling a multifamily home, and it's one of the most important questions that a multifamily home seller is going to face, right? The honest answer is that it depends, right? Vacant is not always better, and occupied is not always better. I know it's kind of a cop out answer, but it's true, right? It depends on the property, you know. It depends on the property. It depends on the rents. It depends on the tenants, on whether they're cooperative or uncooperative. The market rents, whether they're paying market or not, the buyer pool, and your goals at the end of the day. We have to find kind of a way to connect everything and make everything work, in terms of your goals financially, timeline wise, and then incorporate these different variables that happen when it comes to a multifamily home, to understand whether vacant or occupied is going to be the better way for you to go, and how to go about each route correctly, right? You want to make sure that you're taking very, very serious advice from your attorney here in New York when it comes to tenancy, okay, and what the rights are that they have, what the rights are that you have, right? And I always look to have an amicable relationship with everyone involved, and I stress that, I underscore that, and I put a lot of exclamation points after that, right? But you do need to seek professional advice when it comes to dealing with tenants here in New York. Please, please, if you don't get anything else from this video, adhere to that rule. That is the rule of thumb. That is the rule that will save you from so much. Trust me. All right. Um, Seriously. So if your likely buyer is an investor, then they might actually prefer the tenants in place, right? Um, Especially if those tenants are, if they're paying market rent, if they have a strong payment history, and if the leases are clean and organized and they see that the property's been taken care of, right? That gives the investors income from day one and confidence from day one, right? Which is huge. Now, if your likely buyer is the owner occupant or the person that's going to be living there, they, again, we're going to rehash this, but they're going to want at least one of the units vacant so that they can actually move in after the closing, right? It makes sense, right? Because they're looking to live there. That is what the owner occupant is in a multifamily home, uh, property, right? So if none of the units can be delivered vacant, then that automatically knocks them out of the buyer pool, right? Especially if they have a tight timeline to move, right? Some buyers have a desire to buy a home and move in immediately, but it's just a desire. Others need to move right away. So the buyer pool that of buyers that need to move right away and that we're going to be owner occupant, those are going to be the that's going to be the part of the share of the marketplace that you're going to lose. So the buyer pool will shrink, right? But those that desire to move in, but they're flexible on time, and they might be willing to get, maybe get a better deal by being more flexible on that, then those are buyers that are still going to stick around. But it all really depends on how this vacancy is going to be, taken care of, right? If your rents are significantly below market value, some investors will look at that and they will actually see the upside because they see that they can get higher income than they're currently getting, right? But then there's going to be others that see it as a problem, right? They may wonder, how long is it going to take to get the rents to the market value, right? And at what percentage are they able to increase the rents year over year? Like, how are they going to get there, right? Especially with the different legal guidance that there is on that, right? So that's where their mind is how can I get return on my investment? How long is it going to take for that to be real, right? They want to know. They wonder whether there are legal limitations to what they can and can't do, right? And that's on them and their legal representation. They need to find that out, right? But they're still going to be wondering whether the tenants will cooperate. If you think about it, if you have a tenant that's been there for 15, 20 years and their rent has nearly doubled or tripled in that time, but you haven't increased it that much, now they're expecting to get the same type of, property that they're living in now for the same price. And the problem disconnect happens is now they're looking to move, but now they're paying triple what they were doing at the time. Can they do that? Are they willing to do that? Are they willing to move somewhere else where they can deal with that, right? Um, so the people that are buying the property, they're going to wonder whether the tenants cooperate. So if the units are vacant, then that gives the next owner flexibility, right? They're going to be more easily swayed, right? They're going to be able to renovate, they're going to be able to choose their own tenants, and then they're going to be able to deal with market rents at that point, right? They're not going to have to kick anybody out or any of that stuff. So they might be looking to live in one unit. But vacant units also means that there's no income coming in from those units while the property is being marketed. So the question then becomes, can you afford to have no income during that time, right? So this is why your specific, uh, thank you, your specific situation is really what matters here. Because if you can have them vacant, if you can make that happen and it's not putting you in a financial bind, that's one thing. But if it's, really going to be an issue for you, then is that the route you're willing to take, right? So we need to analyze the situation, right? That's why as much as people ask me whether it should be vacant or keep the tenants, there's no universal answer. It's very, very specific to their individual situation, right? It completely depends on your particular situation, your finances, your goals, and all the stuff that we've talked about, right? Um, the mistake, and this is done, people do things without getting professional advice, whether it's because they saw, a TV show on HGTV or Bravo, or they YouTubed it, or they saw it on, they asked Chat, or one of the AIs. You really need to get individual advice. Please, please, please do it. It's free of charge. Advice is not something that you're paying for when it comes to real estate, right? So please take advantage of speaking to professionals before you make mistakes, right? The mistake is in this scenario is assuming that vacant is automatically better or occupied is automatically better. Again, we're saying it depends on a lot of different variables, including your financial situation, right? The better question to ask versus, which one of those two scenarios is better is which setup gives your likely buyer the most confidence. Pardon me. So, is it better to have vacant or occupied units? Based on the buyers that you're expecting, based on the conversations you've had with your real estate agent and experience, that is going to help give the buyer more confidence going in that route. So if the more likely buyer is going to be an investor, you would probably think that vacant would be better. And if you just need a buyer that's going to just need one unit, then having tenants is okay as long as one of the units is going to be vacant for them. But again, it really depends, right? So which setup is going to give the most likely buyer more confidence? That's going to be playing a big role, right? That's what matters, right? Now, the fifth thing to really know when it comes to selling a multifamily property is you want to gather you want to gather your documents before listing the property, right? One thing that can slow down a multifamily sale, and this has happened, is missing paperwork, right? And there are a lot of sellers, a lot of homeowners, a lot of families that are caught off guard um, because the buyers are going to ask questions, and the agent is going to also be asking questions. A lot of buyers, well, the listing agent, right, representing you in the sale of the property is going to be asking you questions ahead of time. But during the transaction, the buyer's agents are going to be asking you questions. The buyer's going to be asking you questions. The buyer's attorney is going to be asking you questions, and your attorney is going to be asking you questions, right? So even their lender may be asking questions, right? And investors definitely going to be asking specific questions. So you want to gather as much information as possible. Um, and some of that information I'm talking about is you want to make sure you have the leases, at least the copy of the first one. You want to have your rent roll organized in some way. So you want to have records of those monthly payments coming in, because that's the only way that people are going to know the money's coming in, right? And or at least receipts, right? There are scenarios where the tenant's paying cash, so you want to have proof of that income, right? That's the rent roll is how much money's coming in from the rent, and buyers are going to be looking at that when it comes to a multifamily home, right? You may need property tax information. You'll definitely need a copy of that. You'll need utility information. A lot of people will ask as just like to set up their financial expectations. They're going to ask, "Oh, can you give me a copy, or can you ask the seller how much they're paying for heat or electric or gas or this on a monthly basis?" So they can not not necessarily to go forward with the deal or not going forward with the deal, but in order for them to understand what they can expect once they purchase the property. So at the very least, out of courtesy, but sometimes it could be make or break because they might be at the cusp of their budget, and the additional expenses, they don't want to live in a situation where it could really negatively impact them. Not just that they'll be, you know, house what is it, house rich and lifestyle poor, but where it could go bad if if they don't think all of these things through, right? They're going to be asking for, or you may need insurance information. You might need, and I would say this one is one that we don't talk about much, but if you've ever had, any kind of termite treatment, keep that. If you've ever had any major repairs in the home and there's some kind of warranty attached to that, keep that in a separate folder, right? Because now we have this thing called the property condition disclosure. You can speak to your attorney about that, but they'll be asking about the history of your home, repairs, this, that, and the other. And when it comes to having warranties and things of that nature, that builds more confidence with the potential buyer. That means you've taken care of the home. This is from past experiences, right? It's showing the buyer that you've taken care of the home, so it increases that confidence because you remember how it was to buy a home, right? You were nervous, but having even the termite treatment um, warranty or proof of when that was done, that's very helpful. Um, and just if the last time you do the roof, what the warranty is on the roof, um, all of those little things, keep that definitely handy. The certificate of occupancy, if you build something like a deck or a pool or some kind of structure with the building, with the property, you want to make sure you have the correct certificate of occupancies. There was a scenario where I had a seller who actually had a multifamily home, but every document in New York stated that it was a single family home. They bought it as a multifamily home, and the only way that they were able to prove it was that he had the physical original copy of the certificate of occupancy. And if you guys are kind of know this, homes in New York, a grand majority of them tend to be very old, right? These are a lot of homes. Other parts of the country call them resales. We just call them sales because it's so common, right? But a lot of these homes are old where the original certificate of occupancy, once things became digitized, where they're being put into the Department of Buildings, paper was lost. There could have been different things. The building department could have flooded. It could have been a fire. Whatever the situation is, some of those documents disappeared, which creates quite an issue. And this is for single family homes too, but in the sense of a multifamily home. And the only reason we were able to prove that it was a multifamily home is because he had the original certificate of occupancy. So those documents that you got at your original closing, find them, put them in a safe location, and that way when it gets to when you're selling your home, things will go a lot smoother. Your timeline will stay on track for the most part, and you won't have any unexpected delays on this end, right? You want to keep all your ducks in a row by keeping these documents available and in good condition. Strongly would suggest to you, once you buy another home, or if you can now, get these documents and scan them in. Get a digital copy of every possible document that you have. That way it's easier to search for, and it's easier to send to any of the parties that would be involved asking for this stuff. Because if you have a folder like this of original documents, you want to give this to anybody, and have the potential of them losing it. At least be able to send them a copy. So please, I beg of you, do that. But the certificate of occupancy, very huge. If you have your original survey, also same thing. Um, we talked about the records of repairs, improvements, upgrades. If you had any permits that were pulled, all of that stuff. The utilities, you may need to show information about who pays which utilities, because in different scenarios, two, three, four families, you're looking at maybe the first floor and the basement utilities are on the owner, or um, the tenant pays the hallway and this and that, or they pay water and they pay that. you want to make sure you have a list of who pays what, when, what that amount is, right? Keep all those records on hand. And rental history would also be good if you've kept that. Keep as much of that documentation as possible. At the end of the day, the more organized you are, or the more organized you become because you watched this video and you took my advice, the easier it becomes for buyers to evaluate the property and have less fear involved. Less fear, more clarity, more transparency equals more confidence. More confidence equals a smoother transaction at the end of the day. So trust me on this. Get all your ducks in a row. If you're thinking about selling, even if it's 5 years down the road, take a list of all this documentation that I just said, and please, please, please have it organized and ready for when that time comes. And the same thing, let's say it's your parents selling the home. Go to them. They may not know where all this stuff is, but try to locate it with them. Try to put it all in one location and then scan it. Or if maybe you don't know, maybe have one of your kids scan it. Uh, you know, be creative in that sense, but make sure that these documents are somewhere for you. These records are incredibly important. Make sure if you do scan them to be safe about digital storage and keep them in a location password protected or that sort of thing, or on a local drive. But please have this documentation. And if you'd like a checklist of all the paperwork, all the documents that you should have prepared and organized to sell your property, please comment checklist, or I should be more specific, pre-sale document checklist, and we'll make sure to send the list out to you of the most important documents that you can have to sell your multifamily home here in New York. All right. At the end of the day, the more organized you are, the easier it becomes for the buyer to evaluate the property. I said that, I'll say it again, whether that's an investor or an end user. And again, the more confidence they have, the easier the whole transaction goes. Confidence really matters. Please trust me on that. When buyers feel confused or they feel a little uneasy, they hesitate. And then when they hesitate and they start questioning things, that uncertainty starts to reflect in the offers, in the price, in attempts at renegotiation. When they feel that the information is incomplete, they wonder what else don't they know. And wouldn't you feel the same way if you or your attorney was asking questions and the owner of the property didn't have the answers for you? I understand that a lot of stuff is understandable because it could have been questions from 50, 60 years ago before they owned the home. But I'm talking about just regular things that you could ask. When did you maintain this? When did you renovate the kitchen? You may not remember that stuff, but that's why it's important to keep all this stuff documented so you can say that, right? Um, when the property is organized, when the documents are ready and organized, the story's clear, everything just helps buyers move forward with more confidence. I restate that because it just makes everything more fluid, keeps things moving along, right? Confidence can lead to, stronger offers and cleaner negotiations all around. So keep that in mind. The sixth thing for you to keep in mind when it comes to, or that you should know when selling your multifamily home, is to understand your rental income, right? It's one of the biggest factors that buyers look at when they're evaluating a multifamily property, right? And you can understand why, because this is a big investment and those additional rents are helping pay the mortgage, whether it's an investor or an end user or owner occupant, right? They want to know how much rent is coming in, if the rents are current, so is everyone paying on time? um, are the rents current market value, right? Which that can be kind of a team effort where you and your agent can come together for that, because you can ask them to run comparable rents in the neighborhood and see if you are there or how much below you are from that. You want to know if you're in the ballpark. Are the utilities included? Which utilities are included? Which are not? What expenses exist? Things like who pays the heat, who pays the hot water, how's garbage taken care of, who does the landscaping. Are you doing all that, or are one of the tenants taking care of that? The snow removal, um, again, garbage collection, all that stuff. who's paying the electric, who's paying the gas, are there separate meters, which floors are included in each meter, is there, is there some type of potential to increase the rent? Again, that's going to be kind of like a team effort between you and your agent to find that one out. Is the property being operated efficiently, right? Do you have a property manager that's taking care of things? Do they have the records? Um, you know, these may seem like small details, but they're not, right? These are the numbers that help buyers decide whether the property makes sense at the end of the day. And especially true with investors, right? There's a lot more emotion involved with end users, with owner occupants, but the investors, they're not only buying the building, right? They're buying the income stream, they're buying the potential, and they're buying, the performance, the future performance of an asset, right? That's how they're looking at this property. So as a seller, you need to understand your numbers before the buyer even starts asking, right? So again, if you need that document checklist, that's one thing. If you want to know what numbers you need to know when it comes to a multifamily home, just comment numbers or message us, and we can send that over to you as well, so you can kind of have a checklist that you can check off and have everything ready for when the time comes, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't know the rental income, if you don't know the expenses, if you don't know whether the rents are strong or weak compared to the market, it just becomes harder to defend the price. It becomes harder to negotiate from a point of strength. And this transparency really builds confidence. It really does. It helps everyone understand that everyone's on the ball. And if you're selling your family's home and you don't have all this information, because that's very common, again, hit us up for these checklists for the numbers that you need to know, so that you can, if you know, sometimes unfortunately there's situations where maybe the family members don't know where the stuff is, it got lost, maybe they're medically, physically unable to help you find this stuff. But at least having a checklist of what to find would help you, versus just kind of finding random documents and just bringing a stack of documents for somebody to sort through, right? So if you'd like that, that's something we can definitely help, especially when we're dealing with, you know, our parents, our grandparents' homes. If we're dealing with an estate, unfortunately, and we're preparing all that, there's been, estates where a multifamily home is within that estate, and we have to deal with all that. So, that's something to keep in mind, right? And this confidence and all this preparation, it just leads to stronger offers. It leads to stronger, you know, um, negotiation. It's just good all around. So please do as much as you can to get it organized ahead of time. Don't do this, after the fact. Get all these ducks in a row ahead of time, right? Number seven, another thing that you should know for when you're selling your multifamily home, a question we get a ton is if you should renovate before selling, right? A lot of sellers, they assume that they need to spend a ton of money before they even list the property, right? And sometimes, yeah, the answer is simply yes. Some improvements may help at the end of the day, but many times, major renovations are not the best move, right? Um, Before you spend tens of thousands of dollars, um, ask yourself one question, right? Will this actually increase what I walk away with, or won't it? Right? Because that is the real question. Not, will it look nicer? Not will buyers like it, but will it increase my net proceeds? Right? Which, if you would like a net proceeds or net sheet to find out what you would net after all of the different fees, and based on how much you have remaining on the mortgage and how much the sales price would be, comment net sheet and we'll get that out to you so you can work through that. It's an Excel doc with formulas, and it has, different information based on a price bracket. That might be very helpful to you to get at least an estimate of what you would be walking away with. But you want to make sure that what these renovations are, if you are doing renovations, will it increase my net proceeds? So again, make sure you're asking for professional advice. Ask a real estate agent, boots on the ground, somebody that's experienced in the area, me, for example, your favorite real estate agent. Don't just rely on YouTube, Bravo, HGTV, the reality shows, AI. Please, please, please speak with a professional because it depends on your particular situation. There's too many generic responses that cause you to do renovations that may be absolutely not necessary. So please, before you spend that money, get professional advice, not robotic advice, not celebrity advice, but real professional local advice, please. Okay. And if you'd like some of that from me, text me or call me 917-982-8899 or email me at dgarcia@kw.com. Just letting you know, right? A new kitchen at the end of the day, it might look beautiful, right? A new bathroom may be super attractive. New flooring, it may help. Maybe stop all that creaking, right? Fresh paint, that may help. Landscaping, that may help. But not every renovation gives you a positive return. Please keep that in mind, right? Some major renovations, they take way too long. Some, they cost more than expected. So that's already taking away from your, net proceeds. And sometimes they create permitting issues. Sometimes they create issues that you didn't even know existed. Once you tear down a wall, you can find a lot of different things that you had no idea were happening, right? So you might be opening Pandora's box. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're doing when you renovate your home in general, it's for your enjoyment. That's the rule of thumb that we kind of talk about. When it comes to trying to maximize your dollar, your walkaway dollar, let's have a more precise conversation. Because one of my colleagues actually always says about the fact, don't spend $1 unless you're getting 3 back, right? That's kind of one of the concepts here. So please seek professional advice. Again, I'm going to come back to that, right? At the end of the day, sometimes the buyers they'll be willing to do the work themselves. We've had families that have, oh, my uncle's a contractor, my uncle's this, my uncle's that, my dad's this. So they'll be doing the stuff themselves. They don't need you to do it. They're gonna redo a lot of the things anyway to match their style and what they like, right? Some investors are already planning to renovate after the closing. I have that right now. The entire first floor is being gutted as we speak, right? So sometimes simple preparation creates a better return than major construction. And by sometimes I mean a lot of the times, right? Cleaning, decluttering is a word we use in the industry, but just getting rid of stuff, maximizing your space, getting rid of personal items, painting. Um, those are the types of renovations that really can help. Minor repairs, yeah. If you see certain cracks, if you see, let's say the area around your hot water heater, your boiler is dusty and dirty, clean it. It's just part of home maintenance, right? Improve the lighting where there's, faulty light fixtures or bulbs that went out. Yes, improve those, right? Clean the common areas, make the entrances look better, cleaner, more organized. Improve the curb appeal. Yes, get rid of the garbage on the front lawn. Keep it nice and trim. Um, you know, just at the end of the day, make sure that the property feels maintained. Don't just do like actually maintain the property, but make sure that it at least feels that way, right? And I understand that a lot of times you're not the sole owner, you might have family involved, things get tricky, but talk to them about having at least that investment in the home is to at least make it feel that it's being maintained, right? With the things that I just mentioned. These things can matter at the end of the day. Just these little things that I just mentioned, they can bring big returns versus the major construction that we were talking about before, right? So again, before you renovate, just speak with someone who understands the local market. Also, that's another thing. Don't just talk to, oh, my brother, my cousin's an agent in Wichita, Kansas, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're speaking to people that know the local market. All right. So please keep that in mind. Because, the goal is not to spend the most money, right? The, the goal is to spend, when it comes to renovations, right? The goal is not to spend the most money. The goal is to spend the right amount, right? So please keep that in mind. Professional advice. Number 8. So this is something that I've had videos on before about just selling your home in general, but price your home correctly from day one, right? It's one of the most important decisions that you're going to make when it comes to selling your home. All right. With a multifamily home, pricing, it can be tricky because the property is going to appeal to different types of buyers in different ways, right? So, when you have an owner occupant valuing the property one way, and then you have an investor that may value it in another way, um, that's something to keep in mind, right? So a buyer looking for rental income, they're going to focus on the numbers. Buyer looking for a home um, to live in, they're going to focus on the lifestyle aspect of it, right? So when it comes to pricing, you really need to price it correctly. But regardless of the buyer type, the first few weeks on the market is what matters, right? Um, that is when that's when the property is fresh. That's when that's when people that have been really, really looking for a home for a long time, they've been on Zillow at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I know that also because of the different marketing that I do. Like, I'll give you an example. Facebook ads. I get leads at where people looking for properties at 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I know they're looking, and they're not looking for the same property over and over again. They're looking for the new stuff. So when your property is fresh and is priced correctly, that's when you really can maximize the impact that your home has on the market, right? That's when buyers are paying the most attention to what's hitting the market. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is agents, because we have limited inventory throughout New York, agents are also very on top of the market. So they're also looking at properties at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or the next morning and reaching out to the properties that are well priced, that just hit the market. That's when you have the most eyeballs on the property, right? Is the first few weeks. That's when you have the best chance to create momentum. And if you overprice, if you miss it, if you miss the correct pricing, you risk losing the momentum. And if you're chasing the market, that's where you really have problems. That's where you're gonna have to cut price, rethink the strategy, and you don't want to be in that position, right? Especially when there's an opportunity there to take advantage of the marketplace, right? To stand out. So you want to beat that competition, right? A lot of sellers, they'll think, let's start high and we'll reduce it later, right? Um, but the problem with that concept is the market often reacts quickly. And again, I can't give blanket advice because there are certain situations where you can do that and it will be effective. But you also have to keep in mind the type of market that we're in at the moment, right? And at the end of the day, um, you know, if buyers feel that the price is too high, they're not going to schedule a showing. They might put it in their shopping cart, but they're not going to do anything with that, right? That's like our Amazon wish list. It's just going to sit there, right? They may watch from the sidelines, but a lot of the times, you guys know how our attention span is. They're tuning it out. They're looking for what's the new one that's going to come out at the right price, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, right? They're going to compare, well, first of all, they might wait for a price reduction, maybe, right? But they may compare your property to better priced options. Even if they were dying to live in that area, or if they, let's say they really wanted to live in that area, but they found a home comparable to yours that's a couple blocks that way, or in a neighborhood that they can deal with, they'll go there if it's a better priced option, right? And if the property sits too long, that's when buyers start asking, what is wrong with this place? Like, why hasn't it sold? Is the seller unrealistic? Is there something that we don't know? Um, are they going to negotiate at all? So the goal is not to be the highest priced property on the market. No. The goal is to be positioned where the market's going to respond positively, right? Because the right price, it doesn't just attract attention. The right price creates action, right? So keep that in mind. Price is critical, all right? The ninth thing to know when you're thinking about selling your multifamily home is to understand what you actually walk away with, right? Many homeowners, they focus entirely on the sales price. They marry themselves to a price, and that is something I can totally understand, right? I get it. Sales price is important, but the sales price is not the whole story. It's just the tip of the iceberg, right? What really matters is what you actually get to keep after the transaction is complete. So what do you walk away with? What is your walk away dollar, right? Because from the sales price, you may still need to account for paying off your mortgage payoff, for example, transfer taxes, attorney fees, closing costs, let's say broker compensation, potential repairs, possible credits that you're giving to the buyer, any concessions that you're giving, moving costs, any liens that might be on the property, and other expenses, right? So if you sell for that number, yeah, so if you sell for one number, that does not mean that that's what you're going home with, right? Which I think a lot of people, they get really wrapped up in the excitement of these big numbers, but you really have to crunch the rest of the scenario down numerically so you understand what you're going to walk away with, right? That's why an estimated net sheet is so important, and we give that to all of our sellers. It helps you understand what you may realistically walk away with after selling. So it's a very good tool to use. It's an estimate that you can plug and play your numbers in, meaning that you can put in, if I sell at X, this is what I walk away with. If I sell at Y, this is what I walk away with, right? And that's important. Um, because for many homeowners, that's the number that really matters most, is what you walk away with. Yes, there are different scenarios where there's a need to sell for XYZ reason, but a lot of times selling is a matter of walk away dollar. How much are you walking away with, right? Because that's the number that determines your next move. It can determine what and whether you can buy something next, right? Which is sometimes why we go through that exercise of seeing your net dollar to see if what you're looking for is even possible, right? Because if you're looking to sell this to buy something else, but when we do the dollars, yeah, when we do the calculations, you won't have enough to walk away with it. You don't have money to borrow. You don't want to have another mortgage. Then it's not worth selling, right? But if we walk through everything and what you're walking away with is going to help you, you know, make the next move possible, then we have something to work with, right? So it may determine how much money you can invest. It could determine how much debt you could pay off. It could determine how much flexibility you have in terms of what the next move is going to be. So before you list, don't just ask, what can I sell for? Like, also ask, what will I actually walk away with, right? And if the agent is confused by what you mean, red flag, walk away, right? Having this clarity, you know, it can really make things that you might have thought not possible become achievable, right? So that's something you really need to know. Now, the 10th thing you need to know, or you should know when it comes to selling a multifamily home, is to not ignore the hidden opportunities, right? Even where in a market where buyers are cautious, opportunities still exist. I've been saying that for years on end, right? There are investors that are actively looking for multifamily properties. There are owner occupied, you know, owner occupants or buyers that are looking for homes where rental income can help them offset the mortgage, especially with the interest rates the way they've been for years, right? And with instability and all the other things that are happening right now, it's a big section of the marketplace, right? People that are house hacking, that are looking for a smarter way to buy, that, the multi-generational families who want multiple living spaces under one roof. And then down the road, they use the equity built up in order to start having others be able to buy their own properties. And then there are buyers who want flexibility, the buyers that want income, buyers who want long-term opportunity. The key is understanding where the demand exists and positioning your property accordingly, right? Sometimes the opportunity, is the income. Sometimes the opportunity is the location. Sometimes the opportunity is a vacant unit, multiple vacant units. And sometimes the opportunity is found in below market rents with upside, right? Sometimes the opportunity lies in the condition of the property. Sometimes the opportunity is in the layout. Sometimes the opportunity is the lot, the parking, the zoning, or the future potential of the actual property. So the opportunities may not always be obvious, but they are often there, you know. And this is why strategy matters, right? Because when you understand the opportunity, you can market the property in a way that speaks to the right buyer. We can highlight the right opportunity, right? So before you sell, have a plan. Before listing your multifamily property, ask yourself a few important questions. All right. And if you'd like a list of these, feel free to ask me for the list of important questions. But why am I selling? Where am I going next? What is my timeline? How much equity do I have? What will I do with the proceeds? Right? Do I need the property sold quickly? Do I need the highest possible net? Do I need one vacant unit? Do I need multiple vacant units? Do I need to coordinate with the tenants? How is that going to happen? What's the best way to coordinate with my tenants? Do I need time after closing? Do my tenants need time after closing? What does success actually look like for me when I get this home sold? How will I be happy walking away from this property? These questions matter because the most successful seller does not simply put their property on the market and hope and pray that everything works out. You could do that, but you also need a strategy, right? And that strategy, it begins with the numbers and and with understanding the goal, right? And you need professional advice to understand the combination of those two things. Because selling multifamily property is not just about, you know, putting a listing online. It's about understanding the property, understanding the income, understanding the buyer pool, understanding the tenants, understanding the timing, understanding the risks, and understanding what you want to accomplish. So bringing it all together, selling a multifamily property in New York, it's different, right? It's, different buyers, different numbers, different opportunities, different challenges, different risks. But when you understand the process and you understand the numbers, understand your options, you can make much better decisions, right? So if you own a, two, three, four family property in Queens, Brooklyn, Long Island, Manhattan, or anywhere in the New York area, and you are thinking about selling, or you're thinking about, selling your family's home, or somebody that could be thinking about selling, I would be happy to, think through the strategy with you, walk you through my thought process once I analyze your situation. And if you would like a personalized value analysis, um, just comment or message me the word value, and I would love to discuss that further with you and get that prepared for you. If you'd like an estimated net sheet, comment or message me the word net. We'll get that over to you. And if you would like a multifamily rent analysis to see how your rents compare to the market rents, comment or message me the word rents, and we can have that done for you as well, right? And if you'd like to discuss your situation and build a strategy, way before actually making a move, comment or message me the word plan, and we can start making that happen, right? You can also visit sellyourqueenshome.com. You can call me or text me at 917-982-8899. Again, I'm David Garcia. I'm a licensed real estate salesperson here at Keller Williams Realty Landmark with Sell Your Queen's Home. And you can always go to our website or visit us on YouTube, our YouTube channel. Just type in Sell Your Queen's Home, you'll find us there. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Sell Your Queen's Home Radio. And remember, the best real estate decisions are rarely based on emotion. They're based on information, on strategy, and on clarity. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in.